The Center for Audit Quality presents Profession in Focus.
Hello, and welcome to this edition of Profession in Focus. I'm Cindy Fernelli, the Executive Director of the Center for Audit Quality, and I'm very pleased to have as our guest today, Zoe-Vonna Palmrose. Zoe-Vonna has a fantastic experience and resume. She is first and foremost a very experienced and renowned auditing and accounting professor. She's taught at the University of California at Berkeley, the University of California or USC, and currently, although soon to retire, at the University of Washington. She also served as the Deputy Chief Accountant for the professional practice at the Securities and Exchange Commission during critical years in 2006 and 2008. So we'll talk a little bit about that too. So Zoe-Vonna, welcome. And I also should note that you are a very valued member of the CAQ's Research Advisory Board. So thank you for your service there.
Well, thank you, Cindy. It's really a pleasure to be here.
So let's just jump right in. As I mentioned, you started in public accounting, but then you went to graduate school and then became an academic and have taught many students in accounting and auditing. As you think about your career, both in practice as well as teaching, what are some of the major changes that you've seen in accounting and auditing?
Well, one change has certainly been that when I was an undergraduate, CAQ was actually knowable by me. And that's no longer the case. I was reminded of this a couple years ago when I was introducing myself to my students, and one of them asked me, when I said I was a CPA, whether I passed the CPA exam the first time. And I said, yes, I did. And their response was, well, big deal. There was nothing to test on back then. And frankly, that's kind of mostly true. Because of the explosion of standards and our dynamic business and regulatory environment, now more than ever, it's important that auditors continue to grow and learn. And this has implications for both practice and education. So auditing's always been a lifetime learnings process, but now it's really critical that we think deeply about who teaches what when in this lifetime process.
Well, very good words to keep in mind, especially as we do our talent initiative. We hear a lot about that, the new skill sets. And one of our board members who is an academic said that really what you need to do is major in learning. That would be the best thing to do for the best advice for a young person.
I think that's really very good advice. And being intellectually curious and wanting to get to the right answer and having the knowledge base and skills to do that is absolutely essential.
I do want to switch gears. We mentioned that you spent 2 years, or almost 3 years, at the SEC as the Deputy Chief Accountant, and you were there during a critical time when the regulators were taking another look at Sarbanes-Oxley, ICFR, internal control over financial reporting, and Section 404B. So that was the, to make a finer point on it, when we went from AS2 to AS5, that was while you were at the SEC. So tell us a little bit about that and what your experiences were there and how you view that work.
Well, first, let me say that I'm really a strong supporter of internal control over financial reporting, or ICFR, and its benefits for the quality of financial reporting. But issuers have long been required to have systems of internal control that provide reasonable assurance, going back to the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, for example. So it's important to recognize that 404 is a disclosure requirement. So it requires that issuers disclose whether they have effective systems of ICFR, and if not, the material weaknesses. And the 404A has requirements for issuers to have a reasonable basis for this disclosure through their assessment process, and then auditors provide assurance on those disclosures through the 404B provisions. I'm really proud of the work that we did at the SEC to help right-size the implementation of 404, including the SEC, developing the SEC's management guidance and working with the PCAOB to replace AS2 with AS5. And in the process, I came to appreciate the SEC's mission in all its many aspects. And one of the things you come to appreciate is that it takes balance. And so now it's really important that we maintain that balance, as again we have a dynamic business environment, a dynamic regulatory environment, and things change. So we need processes in order to make sure that any issues that arise bubble up and get addressed, so that we can maintain this balance.
So give us any other takeaways that you have from your public policy work while you were at the SEC.
Well, let me build a little bit on what we were just talking about in terms of ICFR, which is the importance of these feedback loops. So the necessity for having feedback loops between investors, preparers, auditors, and regulators. So that's a really important component here of what I've learned in our regulatory structure. One of, I think, probably the other things I've learned is the importance of being real clear-headed about what problem it is the regulator's trying to solve through either standard setting or rulemaking. So what's the problem we're trying to solve? And then bringing evidence to understand that problem and understand what the appropriate potential solutions to it would be. So evidence-based rulemaking and standard setting is really important. And I have to tell you, I've also come to appreciate the focus on what I call true north, which is audit quality. At the beginning and end of the day, it's all about audit quality, true north.
I like that. That's a good saying.
That's my staff and I we'd always talk about, where's true north?
Maybe we'll have a hashtag at the bottom of the video saying hashtag true north. You know, you see that on TV shows sometimes. Maybe that's what we'll do. So before we conclude, I am curious, as you are nearing the next phase of your career, as you're getting ready to retire from the University of Washington, although you're still very hard at work, and you've also generously agreed to stay on to the RAB through 2017, which we very much appreciate. So congratulations on your upcoming, one person told me it's not retirement, it's rewirement. You're rewiring your career. But what one piece of advice or what one thing do you predict we will see in the coming years around auditing?
I'm not particularly good about predicting the future, but I can say that there's a important dialogue now around technology, data analytics, and innovations in auditing in that regard. So I would predict that that's going to be an important consideration. And it has interesting and challenging aspects to it. But I have to say that to me it seems a natural sort of evolution of how technology has always impacted auditing. I mean, when I started as an auditor, a 10-key calculator was the new technology, and stat sampling was an innovation. And quite frankly, I've seen the demise of yellow paper work papers. I've seen the demise of typewriters. I have seen the demise of mimeograph machines.
I miss my typewriter, though. I love typewriters.
And I even seen the demise of those work bags that we carried around.
I was going to say those great big heavy bags. That's a good something to retire, those big heavy bags.
And they had all of our auditing and accounting guidance in them. So we just carried it around in our bags. So I've seen a lot of changes, you've seen a lot of changes, natural evolution. But the one thing that I don't think I've seen yet when we talk about the innovation is a change in the foundations of auditing or the conceptual framework of auditing. Auditing is still a judgment process. It's a process that involves decision-making under uncertainty. And it involves professional skepticism. So the need to identify and address disconfirming evidence, those will always be here. And what we're really talking about are tools that will help facilitate those judgments. I hope as we get excited about these new tools and innovations that, again, we don't forget that it's all about audit quality, true north.
Well, those are great words to end on. So, Zoe-Vonna, thank you so much for being our guest today. And thank you all for joining us for this edition of Profession in Focus.